Hello folks, so today's screencast goes with number 6 in the note guide and comes really directly from the textbook. I just am synthesizing a lot of the content they added to the most important things, but feel free to go and read the textbook as marked in red next to number 7, which is I think page 332 to 338. Now for the rest of number 6 in the note guide, you have everything you need on that new monarch sheet that we worked on in class. So feel free to go open that up, use what's there, and I wouldn't copy all of it. You can decide what's most important. If you want to, you could block and copy it so it's in one place. But you were working on Ferdinand and Isabella and the Spider King in class, and so that's what you need for number 6 in the note guide. And today's screencast will be on number 7. All right, I'm going to go in a slightly different order than it is on your note guide because I'm going to start at the top of society and work my way through. Top of society in the Renaissance, besides the king, who himself would have been a noble who managed to exact the most control, like we saw with Henry VII, battling other nobles in the War of Roses to emerge as king. So the nobles are the top of the social pyramid. They are landowners, and this goes back to the feudal system where owning land meant you controlled commerce and controlled wealth in your area. Also coming from the feudal system, they would have been military, strong in military, trained themselves, and having knights and vassals who they could then loan out as armies to the king. So this is still the feudal way of doing things, of not having a national army, but having knights that are bound to a landowner, a lord, a nobleman, and then fights for the country and the king as needed. Nobles would be advisors to the king, so even though a king would rule with power, they would need people, servants, not servants, people consult with to strategize about war or collect money for them, things like that. In the time period we're looking at with the Renaissance, the nobles are going to transition from being in their position because of their military strength to being in their position because of their education. So we see here the influence of humanities and Renaissance as a return to interest in learning and what you can think and not just what you can do and who you can conquer, like what you can do militarily and who you can conquer, which is also pointing to it being a less turbulent time. If your advisor to the king is the person who's the most thoughtful and philosophical instead of the one with the best army, that means mostly the king doesn't have to worry about fighting as much. All of this is best epitomized, best captured in Castiglione's Book of the Courtier. So this is a book from the Renaissance that both tells us what they thought and also shaped what they thought at the time. So it is both a cause and effect. Like, they say art both is a reflection of its time and it's a reflection of its time and it's a shaper of its time, and that's true with this book. So in Castiglione's Book of the Courtier, he says a noble person should aspire to be someone of good character, someone who is well versed in the humanities, so a humanist education, still having that military strength, that medieval value, and then someone who can provide wise advice or counsel to the king. So, like I was saying, we're moving from it being exclusively military to being a time where thinking and strategy, philosophy are playing a role. All right, now, as we've mentioned, I've mentioned in other screencasts, part of the Renaissance is definitely that industry in Europe is starting to gain some headway, inventions and production of goods. And when I say industry, I just mean production of goods. I don't mean manufacturing on the scale that you see in the 1800s. But manufacturing of goods is starting to wake up from its long, backward, sleepy period after the Roman Empire. And you see this, I don't know, as early as like 1100s, 1200s in some places, but by the time we're in the 1400s, it's definitely going. Side note, the 1300s did see a setback with the Black Death, the plague, and the economic downturn. But in the 1400s, they're starting to rebound. So I have here a kind of Renaissance style town in one of the pictures, and towns were where most people lived. You would see, that classic third estate of both the very poor peasants and then the upper third estate of merchants and people, shopkeepers, traders, who were making some more money than the peasants who were just working the land. You would see people living in cities. 1450, the majority of the population is not living in cities, and the cities in Europe are not that large. There are large cities in Asia at this time, but in Europe they're not large yet. So the majority of people living in towns. Your nobles would be living on, estates, their mansions or their palaces on estates. Industries. So industries that you would see in the 15th century. Simple stuff that's not being mass produced. Wool making from sheep, glassware, printing. And with the printing press, that becomes more of a thing. Mining does have a little bit of an improvement. It's not important that you know all the details, but new machinery makes it a little easier in Europe to extract the minerals. And so you see an advance in mining and metallurgy, and the minerals you'd see at this time would be copper and iron and silver. Steel is rendered from iron, and that's not going to play a role until the 1800s. So copper, iron, and silver in the 1400s, that's about where we're at. For a while, Europe had been wanting things from Asia. Asia had been making very fine, high-quality clothing from silk, and had been making fine pottery, very fine porcelains and pottery. These things were desired, as well as spices, made your food taste better, all of that. So it's sort of been this trade imbalance where people just wanted things from Asia. But you do start seeing in 1400s, probably even a little bit in the 1200s before the plague, trading between European areas where there's something of interest or value in Northern Europe, in your Netherlands, that the Italians want. And so you have it not just going out of the area, but interest within the area. And that's the lower picture there is the merchants feeling their textile. Okay, so moving on to banking. I put banking with peasants because I'm going to make a connection here. You start seeing that paper currency is trusted. In order for paper currency to be trusted, you need to have some sort of faith in whoever's issuing it and in a government that's going to stand behind it, or at the very least, a bank that's going to stand behind it. And so those were not things that you saw after the fall of the Roman Empire. For a long time, there wasn't a sense that anything was of value except for land, because land produced the food that you needed. And otherwise, paper wasn't seen as valuable as land. Gold, yeah. Jewelry, precious metals, precious gemstones, but not a paper currency that you just have to take someone's word for it that it's worth something. Banking helps to establish this. It's a reputable place that's issuing the money and that's storing your money, and you can have some faith that if you take a banknote from your friend to this building, they will give you gold for it. It'll be redeemed for something that's valuable to you. Serfs become freed in Western Europe in the 1400s, early 1500s. So serfs were peasants who they're not quite slaves, but they can't leave where they've been born. They have to work that land. So they're tied to the land. The change happens that they are now being paid for their labor and they are legally free. it's not a huge difference in their daily life. Like, their life would probably still be very much the same, but it's not nothing. Like, symbolically, if they or their children wanted to move somewhere else or take up another occupation, they have that freedom. Whoops, that is not supposed to be scare labor. That's supposed to say scarce. Let me fix that. That should say scarce labor. So scarce, or very limited labor. The Black Death wipes out a third of European population, and laborers, as well as all the classes, merchants and nobles. And so when you don't have as many laborers, the people who are actually doing the work can make demands. They can say, well, if you want me to till your field, you have to pay me instead of making me tied to the land. So the balance of favor goes towards the laborers. Now it's not such a big deal that they're getting protection from the Lord, because Lord can't protect them from the Lord. I mean, the landowner can't protect them from the plague, and even when the plague dies down, there's few enough of the workers that they can make demands. So that also helps to end serfdom. Banking has a controversial background. The church banned Christians from banking for a while, and so it was done by other religions like Jewish people, and outside minorities like the Armenians are going to take it up in the Ottoman Empire. I don't know all of the history. I think that when you lend people money, they hate you when you ask for it back, and so it was not a very popular thing to do. It's also against some tenets in the Bible, and so it was seen like the Pope was like, we shouldn't do it, let's make other people do it. But there is ways to make a lot of money off of banking if you charge interest, and once it is growing, and under the de Medicis, you see them accruing a lot of wealth, and even lending money all the way up the supply chain to like the Pope and to kings. Let's take a moment to look at this painting by Hans Holbein the Younger that's on the right. Hans Holbein was an example of Northern Renaissance art. He was Dutch, and he lived a lot of his life in England. There is a whole lot packed into this painting, and historians have debated its significance, its symbolism. That's a bummer. My image didn't include the coolest part, but I'll tell you about it. Let me go over a couple things. So on the left-hand side here, you have one man, a historical figure. He was an ambassador to the court of England, to Henry VIII's court. He was dressed very regally and secularly. And on the other side here, you have a man of the church. And so, was this just done as a portrait? Was it done as some sort of symbolism of the two pillars of society, trade and church? Was it done to show tension between those? Historians debate. In between the two men are a number of revealing artifacts about the time. Here are all the things they would have found important. And again, if you do research on this painting to find out more, you'll find out like the names of all these little instruments on the table here, here, and here, and here, and here, that would have been like the latest and greatest technology, and they wanted shown off. This image here that's resting, or this cloth here that's resting on, let me try it in yellow, see if it comes out better. Yeah. That is a pattern, geometric pattern originating from Persia, Ottomans, somewhere there. So it shows trade with Asia. And let me just clear my screen for a sec. Then underneath you have a musical instrument. A lot's been made of the fact that one of the strings is missing on the lute and what that means. There's also a globe, and the globe has one area of France highlighted, which probably is revealing of where the ambassador's from. So there are all these interesting details. The most interesting detail that I don't know why I got cut off in my image, I'm so sad, is there's an anamorphous skull in the foreground. And the anamorphous skull is super cool. It's like this huge thing. It doesn't fit in with the scene at all, but if you look at the painting from a certain angle, you can see it. You know what? I am invested enough in you seeing this that I'm going to stop this for a sec and get you a copy with the anamorphous skull, because it's really pretty cool. All right. I managed to find it and cut it and paste it, and so now we have this very strange thing. So maybe your eye doesn't notice it at first, but look down by their feet. What the heck is that? That is the skull. Huge, disproportionately large skull. And it doesn't look like a skull unless you are looking at the painting from a particular angle. I don't think you can do it from a cut and paste like this. I think you have to have the painting in front of you. Why is this there? Well, some historians have said he just wanted to show off this skill, that Renaissance artists were super into this anamorphous technology. Other people have said that there's always something to point out mortality in paintings from the Renaissance, and so the skull is that. Again, freakishly large, but representing that. You also have a couple other references to mortality. That is that necklace is representing death, and then over here, very small, up here, you have the crucifix, which could represent either religion or death. All right, enough with the ambassadors, but it's super cool if you want to look up more about it. Okay, let's go into marriage. So marriage in the 15th century, in the 1400s, during the Renaissance, would have been seen as a duty to your family. I guess Romeo and Juliet is supposed to be set around this time, but again, it was written after the fact. So it was written in 1600, looking back at this time and imagining maybe that there'd be romantic love. And even Romeo and Juliet, like, the romantic love wasn't supposed to, like, it goes against the conventions. That's why it's such an unhappy ending. You would live in, so if you were a Renaissance family, you would live in a town with your extended family, your grandparents, your cousins, all of that in that town. It's very uncommon for people to move away to a new place to live. So that's first of all, that sense of like your town being your place and your family all being there. Going with that, you would feel a pride, a sense of connection. It's not just where you're from, it's your people. Everyone there is part of your family. So that helps enhance the feelings of pride in your family and also loyalty to the family. Marriage at this time would have been a largely financial and political thing arranged between families. The wealthier the family, the more that's at stake, and the less that you get to choose who you're going to marry, to the point of, marriages between royal families being done just for the purpose of securing more land, like that. Yeah, I think that's all I want to say about that. Now, a dowry, a bride's family would pay a dowry, and it wasn't common for people to marry outside their class. You would marry within your class. But let's say you were a lesser noble, but you had money, you could pay to have your daughter married to a noble with more land, and that kind of elevates your status. Or you could pay, maybe, I'm not positive, but maybe you could pay if you were a merchant to get into nobility. That seems like less likely this far back in time, though you will start seeing it more in the 1700s. So yeah, that was, a way of social climbing. You married your daughter into a better family, and you did that through the power of your dowry. The bigger your dowry, the better. Conversely, I imagine if you were an old, established family with a lot of land but couldn't afford a very nice dowry, then you might have to marry your daughter beneath you, which would be a bummer. And I'm sure there's some great historical fiction about that. All right, and then some little happy family pictures here. Yeah. Go ahead and move on. Come on. So that concludes the details that you need to know for number 7 in your note guide, which concludes your note guide. Unless you still need to go back and add the new monarch stuff, then please do that. Now would be a good time to begin answering the left-hand questions if you haven't. There are also synthesis questions at the bottom. Both the left-hand and the synthesis questions help you to prepare at the end of the unit for the assessment. And in this case, your assessment will be a short answer question or 3 short answer questions around one topic. And it will be the beginning of next week. Alrighty. Bye-bye.